Imagine waking up to find a message scrawled across your garage door, the kind that sends a chill down your spine. Oh, and your nosy neighbor is already watching like it's her favorite soap opera. The cops don't care, the fines keep piling up, and rumors are spreading faster than wildfire. Someone's clearly decided this neighborhood isn't yours to call home, but they messed with the wrong person. Let's start from the beginning. Elijah Bennett stepped onto his porch, taking a deep breath of that crisp suburban air. It was supposed to feel peaceful, like a new beginning for him and his daughter Jasmine, but instead it reeked of entitlement, nosiness, and thinly disguised hostility. And today, that hostility came in the form of a bright red letter from the HOA. He tore the envelope open, casually expecting some nonsense about lawn height or trash bins left out too long, but nope, this one took the cake. They were demanding that he repaint his house within 5 days or else $500 a day in fines. He scanned the letter again, just to make sure his eyes weren't playing tricks. The reason? His house was apparently out of compliance with the neighborhood aesthetic. Elijah let out a short, bitter laugh. Aesthetic? Yeah, right, he muttered, shaking his head. He looked around the street, taking in the rows of cookie-cutter houses, beige walls, brown roofs, lifeless front yards. The whole neighborhood looked like it had been copy-pasted from a dull, outdated catalog. His house, a sturdy brick two-story with a touch of personality, stood out like a beacon of originality. And apparently, that was a cardinal sin here. Elijah sighed and glanced across the street. There she was, Agnes Hastings, the neighborhood watchdog, or, as Jasmine liked to call her, Mrs. Nosy McGlares-a-lot. She was standing on her porch, pretending to rearrange a pot of dead flowers. But Elijah knew better. The old woman was watching him, her sharp eyes narrowing, as if he were a threat to the sanctity of suburbia. Agnes had made her feelings clear the moment he moved in. There were always those innocent comments, laced with something uglier. You must feel so out of place here, or, I just hope this neighborhood doesn't go downhill. Yeah, subtlety wasn't her strong suit. Elijah clenched his jaw. He didn't need a crystal ball to see where this was going. He'd dealt with enough of this back when he was stationed overseas. Only now, the enemy didn't wear a uniform. They hid behind regulations and fake smiles. Later that evening, Elijah walked into the HOA meeting like a man on a mission. The fluorescent-lit room fell silent the moment he stepped inside. He could feel the tension crackling in the air. Oh, they weren't happy to see him, that was for sure. Ted Whitaker, the HOA chair, strutted over like he owned the place. The guy had that typical I'm important look. Slicked back hair, a shiny watch, and a smile so fake it could have been a Halloween mask. Ah, Mr. Bennett, Ted greeted, his tone dripping with forced politeness. How can we help you today? Elijah crossed his arms and stared him down. By explaining why I'm getting fined over some imaginary paint issue. Ted chuckled lightly as if Elijah had just told a joke. Oh, it's nothing personal. We just have community standards. Your house's color doesn't blend well with the neighborhood. There it was. That word, standards. Elijah knew exactly what that meant. He'd heard it 1,000 times before in different forms. You don't fit in. You're not one of us. Funny how my house wasn't an issue until I moved in, Elijah replied, his voice cool but sharp. A few people in the room shifted uncomfortably. Whispers floated through the crowd, but no one spoke up. Ted, to his credit, kept his composure. He was a pro at this game, after all. Mr. Bennett, Ted said, smiling like a politician on camera, we're just trying to maintain property values. I'm sure you understand. Elijah took a step closer. Oh, I understand. I understand perfectly. His gaze didn't waver, and for a moment, Ted's smile flickered. Just a tiny crack in the armor. Satisfied, Elijah turned and walked out of the room. He could feel their eyes boring into his back, their silent judgments chasing him out the door. But he didn't care. This wasn't just about paint anymore. This was war. When he got home, Jasmine was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and raised an eyebrow. How did it go? Elijah shook his head, tossing the crumpled letter onto the coffee table. Same old story. Bunch of people pretending to care about rules. Jasmine smirked. Let me guess. Ted did that fake smile thing? Yep, like he's running for office. Classic, she said, rolling her eyes. So what now? Elijah sighed and ran a hand over his face. Now, we fight back. Jasmine grinned. Good. I was getting bored around here anyway. Elijah chuckled. That was his girl, always ready to stir things up. But deep down, he knew this wasn't going to be easy. These people weren't going to back down quietly, and neither was he. As the night stretched on, Elijah stood by the window, staring out at the neighborhood. Lights flickered in distant houses. Shadows moved behind curtains. He could almost feel the collective disapproval oozing from every direction. This wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a battleground, and they had drawn the first line. But Elijah had faced far worse before. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. Elijah woke up to a banging noise. Was someone knocking on the door? Nope. It was just the wind flapping a new notice taped right across the front. Bright red, bold font, impossible to miss. It was like the HOA had sent a message in flashing neon lights. He ripped it down, scanning the words, "Fines begin today. Failure to comply will result in further action." What the hell? Elijah muttered under his breath. He shook his head in disbelief. It hadn't even been 24 hours since the last meeting, and they were already coming for him. Jasmine appeared at the top of the stairs, her hair a frizzy mess, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What's going on, Dad?" "Neighborhood Gestapo's playing games," he muttered, balling up the paper. He tried to keep his tone light, but Jasmine wasn't stupid. She knew something was off. "Do you need me to—" "Nah," Elijah cut her off. "Go get ready for school. I've got this." Jasmine gave him a long look, but didn't push further. As she shuffled back upstairs, Elijah stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the eerie stillness of the street. It was too quiet, that kind of someone's watching quiet. Agnes Hastings was probably peeking it out from behind her curtains, gloating. The neighborhood hostility escalated faster than a high school rumor. Trash bags magically appeared on Elijah's lawn. The sprinkler system mysteriously broke, flooding the yard with muddy water. And then came the graffiti. He stepped outside one morning to see the words, "Go back where you came from," spray-painted across his garage door. Elijah's fists clenched so tight, his nails bit into his palms. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." He filed a police report, thinking it was the logical next step. Maybe they'd take things seriously. Yeah, no. That dream lasted about 5 minutes into the conversation with the officer. "You sure you didn't see anyone?" the cop asked, his voice flat and uninterested. He scratched at his notepad like he was counting down the minutes till his next coffee break. "No, I woke up and found it like this," Elijah said, fighting to keep his voice steady. The cop tilted his head, giving Elijah a look that was just a hair short of outright suspicion. "You think you might have missed something?" Elijah stared at him. "You think I'd vandalize my own house?" The officer shrugged, like it wasn't the dumbest question anyone had ever asked. "People do crazy things these days." Elijah laughed, one of those short, humorless laughs that says, "I see exactly what you're doing, and you're not fooling anyone." "Right, crazy things, got it." The cop didn't even bother hiding his indifference. He handed Elijah a copy of the report and muttered something about following up, but Elijah knew better. There'd be no follow-up, not from them. Things only got worse from there. Jasmine started having nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night in tears. Elijah found her curled up on the couch one morning, her face pale and drawn. "Jazz, you all right?" She shook her head. "I keep dreaming someone's outside the house, just watching." Her voice cracked a little, and it broke Elijah's heart. "Hey, listen to me," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Nobody's going to hurt you. I won't let that happen." But even as he said the words, Elijah felt the simmering anger building inside him. He wasn't just angry, he was furious. These people wanted to break him, to make him feel powerless in his own home. Well, good luck with that. He installed security cameras around the house the same day. Every angle was covered, front yard, backyard, driveway. If anyone so much as breathed near his property, Elijah would know. Meanwhile, the HOA kept piling on the fines like it was some kind of twisted competition. Every other day, another notice showed up in the mailbox. Violation, failure to comply. It was like they had a whole assembly line dedicated to harassing him, and the harassment didn't stop at his front door. It followed him to work. Susan, his boss, who'd always been friendly, suddenly turned cold. Conversation stopped when he entered the room. A few co-workers muttered things like, "Heard he's causing trouble in his neighborhood," or, "You know how military guys are, they snap under pressure." Elijah pieced it together quickly. Someone, probably Ted, was spreading rumors. They wanted him isolated, cut off from any support. Classic intimidation tactics. But Elijah wasn't about to let them win. He started digging. Late at night, after Jasmine was asleep, he scoured public records, looking for anything that might expose the HOA's dirty laundry. He found stories, other families who'd been driven out under suspiciously similar circumstances. He reached out to them, slowly building a case. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about sending a message. These people thought they could bully anyone who didn't fit their perfect neighborhood mold, but they were about to learn that Elijah Bennett wasn't going anywhere. The battle was only just beginning. Elijah's late-night research became an obsession. It wasn't just about the graffiti or the fines anymore. He wanted to know how deep this rabbit hole went, and the deeper he dug, the uglier it got. HOA records showed a pattern. 2 years ago, a black family on the other side of the neighborhood had been hit with so many fines that they lost their house to foreclosure. Their violations included things like having non-standard landscaping and unsanctioned gatherings, which in reality were family barbecues. Then there was the Latina woman who'd left last year. Neighbors had reported her for unapproved renovations. Turns out, all she did was repaint her mailbox. Elijah reached out to these former residents. Their stories were eerily similar: intimidation, fines, and rules that seemed to change depending on who you were. By the time he finished those calls, Elijah's blood was boiling. A few days later, Elijah sat across from Monica Harris in her downtown office. Monica was in her 40s, sharp as a razor, with an intensity that made people sit up and listen. She didn't waste time on small talk. "So," she said, flipping through the file Elijah had brought, "we're dealing with selective enforcement and racial discrimination. Classic HOA nonsense." "Tell me about it," Elijah muttered. "These people think they're untouchable." Monica raised an eyebrow. "That's because they've gotten away with it, but not anymore. We can hit them with a harassment lawsuit. I'm talking civil rights violations, Fair Housing Act, the works." Elijah nodded slowly, his mind racing. "And how long does something like that take?" "It's not an overnight thing," Monica admitted, "but here's the thing. You've got evidence, video footage, witness statements. What we really need is public pressure. These people thrive in the shadows. We drag them into the spotlight and they'll start cracking." Elijah wasn't exactly thrilled about going public. He'd always preferred to handle things quietly, without a media circus. But he also knew Monica was right. If he didn't push back now, they'd just keep doing this to the next family, and the one after that. The first news station Elijah contacted didn't waste any time. Within 48 hours, a camera crew was outside his house, setting up tripods on the sidewalk. By day 3, there were 4 different news vans parked on the street. Ted Whitaker couldn't walk his dog without someone shoving a microphone in his face. "Mr. Whitaker, care to comment on the allegations of racial discrimination?" one reporter asked, her voice loud enough to echo down the block. Ted plastered on that politician's smile Elijah knew too well. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said, his voice smooth but strained. "Our HOA enforces rules equally for all residents." The reporter wasn't buying it. She glanced at her notes. "Really? Because Mr. Bennett has documentation that suggests otherwise, footage of you planting trash on his property, for example." Ted's smile faltered. His eyes darted around like he was searching for an escape route. I can't comment on ongoing matters," he stammered before rushing back into his house. The door slammed behind him, the fallout spread like wildfire. Elijah's story was all over the local news. Neighbors whispered behind curtains. The HOA's reputation was in shambles, and residents were divided. Some people, like the Johnsons across the street, knocked on Elijah's door to show support. "We had no idea this was happening," Mrs. Johnson said, her voice trembling. "If we'd known, we would have spoken up sooner." Others, like Agnes Hastings, doubled down. She was caught on camera muttering about outsiders ruining the community. When the footage aired, social media tore her apart. "This is what happens when people like him play the race card," Agnes hissed at a gathering of neighbors. Elijah heard about it later from a friend. He didn't care. He had bigger things to focus on. Monica had filed an official complaint with the state's Fair Housing Authority, and the investigation was gaining traction. Jasmine, however, was a little more vocal about her frustrations. "They're just mad they got caught," she said one evening while scrolling through news articles. "Agnes is a walking stereotype. I mean, seriously, who still uses phrases like outsiders?" Elijah chuckled. "Let them talk. The more they run their mouths, the worse they look." Momentum was on his side now, and he wasn't about to slow down. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was about making sure no one else had to go through what his family had endured. The HOA thought they could bully him into submission. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Elijah and Monica walked into the HOA meeting with a camera crew in tow. The room froze. Ted Whitaker's face turned ghostly pale as Monica placed a stack of legal papers on the table. "You've been served," she announced with a smile. "This is outrageous," Ted sputtered. "Outrageous?" Monica shot back. "You using HOA rules to harass minority families is what's outrageous. It's over, Ted." The room erupted. Board members turned on Ted, blaming him for everything. Reporters caught every second of the chaos. Elijah stood silently, watching their empire collapse. Within weeks, the state launched an investigation. Ted resigned in disgrace. Several board members were fined, and Elijah's house was cleared of violations. The harassment stopped. Jasmine finally slept peacefully, and Elijah got to work repainting the garage. This time, he chose a bold electric blue. "Dad, that color's a bit much," Jasmine teased. "Exactly. Let them stare," Elijah replied with a grin. Agnes Hastings peeked from her window, but quickly ducked back when Elijah waved. He laughed to himself. "Yep, let them stare. What would you have done in Elijah's place?" Have you ever faced or heard of similar situations from your friends or family? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button, and let's spread awareness. This story was created to shed light on real-world issues and inspire change. Your voice matters. Together, we can help make the world a better, fairer place.